Sometimes people will ask me, Hannah, how much savings is enough savings in my business? I hear lots of different recommendations and I just don't know if I have enough cash in the business. Should I be saving more? I don't know. So that's what we're going to talk about today in this video. How much business savings should we really have? And let's talk through it because it's not going to be the same for every single business. Surprise, surprise. Everybody's a little bit different and some businesses will need more cash in their business. Some will need less, but that's what we're going to talk about and what are those things you need to think about when you're trying to figure out how much is right for your business. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Relay. Relay is a modern business banking solution for small businesses to gain cash flow clarity. Now, Relay was specifically built for small businesses. All the tools have been built with small businesses in mind, and they have all the tools that you need to manage your cash in your business with confidence. You can have up to 20 bank accounts, and all of them can be set up virtually, and you don't have to worry about things like account minimums, overdraft fees, and monthly account fees, which is so nice. So if you want to learn more about Relay, you can go to claracfo.com/relay. And also watch out, in the next couple weeks, we are going to post a full review of Relay, so you'll actually be able to see behind the scenes. So if you are considering it, definitely make sure to check out that video and also make sure you are subscribed. Okay, so I want to talk about how much savings do we need. So you may have heard there's kind of this kind of tried and true sort of rule of thumb, if you will, of 3 to 6 months of cash in your business is what you need in order to run a healthy business. And when they say months of cash, we actually did a video recently on months of cash and how to calculate that. But for the most part, what that means is just how many months of operating expenses do you have saved up so that if your revenue just really dried up, let's say like you're an events business and COVID hits and all of your events go away, you don't get paid any dollars for multiple months, how much money would you have to continue running your business, okay? So 3 to 6 months is kind of what you hear people say, but do you need 4 months? Do you need 6 months? Is 3 months okay? Is 2.5 months okay? I mean, we can be kind of all over the place. So what is the best for your business is the important part. And I say this specifically because what I want you to balance using your cash in the right places. Some businesses do not need to have that much cash. And then some businesses need to have more than that. And there might be situations that if you have too much cash sitting in your business, you're not using it for the other things you might need in your life. So I have seen this happen where businesses hoard a lot of money in their business, but they're not, fully funding their retirement accounts at home, or maybe there's investments they want to make at home that they're not doing because they feel like they need to keep all this cash in their business. And, really, business owners, we do business so that we can earn profits, and some of that does come back to our personal lives in order to be using it for other things. So yes, it's great that you have tons of cash in your business, but are you potentially keeping too much in your business? That might happen. So I want to give you guys some things to think about to determine what do you need in your business. So I would say that across the board, 1 month of operating expenses is kind of the bare minimum. Ideally, we have at least 1 month of expenses in our business in cash, okay? So if you have $50,000 of monthly expenses, that means you have at least $50,000 in a checking account. That is baseline kind of necessity, really. Like that's if we're operating on much less than that, we're really like having to monitor our cash flow super tightly, and it can be kind of scary, and maybe you're not going to make payroll, and that's not what I want for anybody. Okay, so I would say our starting point is 1, and we're going to think about do we need to add additional months of cash onto your determination of how much cash is good for you. And here's some things to think about. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what is your revenue model? How are you earning money in your business? Are you on retainer? Do you have long-term contracts with clients? Do you have just a brick and mortar shop that people walk in every day and buy things from you? Do you have maybe some seasonality in your business that needs to be taken into consideration? How is money coming into the business, and is it consistent? Those two things, like how is money coming in? Is it consistent? So for our businesses that are on monthly retainers, where maybe they get paid every month by clients and that money comes at the beginning of the month, and they don't have any accounts receivable, they just have money that comes in every single month, those types of businesses might actually need less cash on hand than the businesses that have long-term contracts. So one thing that I want you to do in order to determine maybe how many months you might need is to calculate something called days sales outstanding. Days sales outstanding is a metric that we use to say, okay, how fast are we collecting receivables? And does our business have any accounts receivable? If it doesn't, then it's probably maybe needs a little bit less cash, but considering these other things I'm going to tell you about. But days sales outstanding is where you can take your accounts receivable divided by your total income for a period of time, and then you multiply that times 365 if you're looking at the full year. Let's say you have a business that has $10,000 in accounts receivable. That's going to be the numerator on top. And then $100,000 is your denominator. That is your revenue for the period. We're going to say a full year. So 10,000 divided by 100,000 is 0.1. And then you multiply that times 365 since we're talking about a year. If you calculated a half year or something, half year of revenue, you would do that by a half year. But we're going to look at 365 days. So that would mean 36.5 days to collect. So they're basically saying that you have on average outstanding 365 days of revenue. Now, I would say that if you have anything over 30 days, you probably need to have an extra month of cash reserved. Now, if you have over 60 days, you probably need to have 2 extra months of cash reserved, because what this would say is it's saying there's going to be a long time between when you do the work and when you get paid. And that means you probably need extra cash in your business. So for these businesses that have long-term contracts, and maybe you have some customers that really are very slow to pay, and if you don't want to rely on debt and you want to self-fund your business, which I would recommend wherever possible, then having cash to cover those ups and downs will be helpful. So in those situations, if you have a really high day sales outstanding number, first thing I would say is you need to work on it and try to get that number lower. But second of all, that might mean, hey, I need to build up some extra cash, because if I have this really long sales cycle, I need to have that money in reserves, because I might need to use it just to fund my operations while I'm waiting for big checks to come in from clients. Okay, so if you have no accounts receivable and you're like a brick and mortar, people are coming in, or you don't do any work until somebody pays you, then you're not going to have to add any additional months for this factor. Okay, so day sales outstanding is a fantastic metric if you're trying to figure this out. Okay, the next thing I would say is that, do you have really high cash needs at different points in time in your business? So if you are, let's say, a inventory-based business, and you have, let's say there's products that you have to buy, but you buy them once a year because you have to place a huge order, and that order needs to go out, and you need to have cash in reserves in order to make that order. And you don't want to rely on debt. Again, like this is kind of like, if you don't want to use that, you need to build up your cash. That might be a consideration to add some additional months of cash, or just add the sort of amount you want to have on hand. That might mean like, hey, I want to have an extra $50,000 on hand at any point in time. So if we need to make another inventory order, I can go out and do that. If you also know that you're going to be making large purchases in the future and you're working on your savings for that, that would be another reason to build up your cash stores. Okay. So kind of thinking into like, do I have like really intense cash needs at at specific points in time? That might be a reason to build up your cash reserves. Another thing to look at is whether or not you have seasonality. So some of our businesses are going to just be dead for a couple months of the year. So it might mean that like December and January for you are awful, or maybe January and February. That happens a lot in retail businesses. It even happens to service-based businesses too. Sometimes January and February are just dead. So if that happens, you might need to consider having higher amounts of cash reserves, because you know that business is coming back. It's just seasonality. Nobody wants to do work in January, February for whatever it is, but you need to have cash to get through that, because you don't want to lay off your employees, and you need to keep business operating as normal, and you need to have the cash to do that. So if you have significant seasonality, I would say, what are those low points? What are those low months? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? Look at your history and say, are things down 100%? There's no revenue coming in. Is it down 50%? It's 50% less than normal. And then look to see, do I need maybe 1 extra month of cash or 2 months of cash to help me float through those times? So I would look to see like, what were your losses in those previous years during that seasonal period, and say, okay, I need to kind of build up that amount of cash in order to get through those periods. Okay. So If you can't find additional work during that time, then save up the cash and just know that that's something that you need to work towards, okay? Another thing that I would think would cause someone to need additional months of cash or less cash is how predictable is your revenue. So again, like if we're on a retainer business where we kind of know, okay, we've worked with clients previous month, the expectation is they're going to continue on, we have contracts with them, the predictability of revenue is very high. But if you have a pipeline that's always up and down, you don't know when projects are going to come in, maybe projects look like they're going to be great, but then they can all fall through at the last minute. This can be, very tumultuous for a business, and the way that you can get through some of that is by having cash on hand. So if you don't have very good predictability, I would say you want to have more cash on hand. So if you have a factor of all these things, maybe you have really high days sales outstanding and you have really high seasonality, or you have one quarter that's just no business at all, and then you have really low predictability, you might need to have something like 8 or 9 or 10 months of cash, even a full year of cash. I mean, that doesn't really hurt to have that much cash in the bank. But I want you to think about what are these factors that are actually affect your business, and do we need to keep the money in the business, or could it potentially go home to the owner, or could we do something else with it, like invest in some things because we want to continue to grow the business? So, look at all of these things and say, okay, how does this work for me? What are we looking at here? So you just need to look at all these different factors and say, which of these affect me and what feels like the right amount of cash for us to shoot for? Because probably it's not very likely that most of you have this already on hand. It's going to be a goal that you need to work up to, and it's totally fine. It's good to have a financial goal to say, okay, once we reach X amount of dollars in the business, I will be able to take those excess distributions that I'd like to have. Or once the business gets to this point, then we can invest in this other thing. So having some cash savings is kind of like building that security blanket for you so that you don't have to rely on the bank and high interest debt. You don't have to, really, this is going to help you sleep better at night, but you don't have to rely on other things or maybe say no to investments that are really good for the business because you're going to have that security blanket of cash, okay? Now, the business owners that had excess cash when they went into COVID, the ones that we worked with, that we observed, just did better. The business owners were able to make more strategic decisions. They didn't have to make panicked decisions. They were able to give themselves some time to figure out what they wanted to do. Some of them were able to make investments into different areas and actually take opportunities during COVID. So I want to just say that when you have cash, you have flexibility, and that's what you're working towards by building up this cash. So set a goal for yourself. Think about what's right for you, okay? And then what's right for you is going to be maybe different than your other business owner friend. Your other business owner friend might need 6 months of cash, but 2 months might be totally fine for you. I'm going to tell you a quick story. We have a client that had a lot of cash, had it built up, and we just kind of started to get to the sense of we don't really need all this money here. And she had set a goal with her personal financial planner to retire at a certain age. And that personal financial planner had told her, hey, you need $200,000 of distributions from the business this year in order for you to reach this retirement goal that you have. And so we were able to look at everything that was happening in the business, revenue projections, balances of cash, and just prioritized her being able to take out that amount of money because she had it sitting there and it wasn't earning really any interest besides sitting in a savings account. So it wasn't, earning the potential gains had it been invested in the market. So we looked at it very strategically and said, hey, actually, you don't need to have 3 months of cash in your business. So having more like a month and a half was actually just fine because her business was on retainer. It had no accounts receivable. Credit cards were charged at the multiple times a month, actually. So in this case, it was just a very clear picture that we didn't need to have all the cash that we had on hand. And in that situation, I do kind of advise business owners to keep some liquid cash that if we needed to put it back in the business, we could. But, she had already thought about that. We had liquid cash, just in case we needed an investment or an infusion from the business owner. But, that's a really practical example of hey, maybe you don't need 6 months. So I hope that gives you some things to think about, and go and look at it and say, how much cash does my business really need in the business? And if you have come up with a different number than what you thought based on the general rule, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. And just remember, if you're looking for a banking solution to help you with separating out your accounts and moving money over into savings accounts, Relay is a solution for you. You can definitely check that out. So look for links in the description box below and let me know if you have any questions. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.